Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, good morning. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic is on getting started with Maestro deployments. Please use the Q&A chat if you have any questions during the webinar. We'll make sure we answer those. Our presenter today is a solution architect from Georgia, Tom Hartig. Tom, floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Tom Hartig. I'm a solution architect. Been with Checkpoint almost 9 years, and Maestro is kind of my specialty. I cover all of North America. So I'm just going to go through some tips and tricks for new deployments. Kind of start with a high-level overview of what Maestro is, all the different components, and then get a little bit into the weeds as far as how to make it a smoother deployment for first-time deployments. Go through just a couple little best practices things too. And like Robert said, please use the Q&A. So that way we can have some questions and address that towards the end. So let me go here. All right, so we'll start with just high level, what is Maestro? So it's a platform that allows you to scale your security as your needs grow. So you're obviously familiar with, the traditional active standby clusters. As you know, once you outgrow the capacity of them, you've got to rip and replace, and you've got an active and a standby member. What Maestro allows us to do is it allows us to start with as little as 2 appliances, active, and to scale up to many, many more as your needs grow, and to cycle in new appliances as the old ones go end of life, end of support, without having to rip and replace it all. How do we do that? So we've got the orchestrators, that is where all the connectivity from your data center terminates to. And then we've got our normal quantum appliances, the same appliances that you would use for a traditional active standby cluster. Those connect to the orchestrators and they carry out the inspection of the traffic. You don't end up needing at cluster IPs anymore for each individual member. It is simple. It's one IP per interface that is presented. That's all you got to keep track of, no matter how many appliances that you add. So this makes it a lot easier for you to buy the security capacity that you need and then expand as your needs grow. You get to throw away your crystal ball, so there's no guessing as to, okay, I think this is going to work. And then 6 months down the line, no, it's not going to work. We need to do something else. We need to, take it out, build something bigger. So you remove that risk of under or over specifying a solution, because it's been very hard to get it just right with an active standby cluster without the ability to grow it as you need. And that's what Maestro helps you resolve. So from the component standpoint, we've got the orchestrators up at the top. As I mentioned, all your connectivity terminates there from your data center. So, firewall management terminates there, DMZ, internet, backend, backup networks, all of that kind of stuff, databases, everything terminates there. And then you've got your compute resources at the bottom, which are our normal quantum appliances. Anything from a 5900 and up, including all of our newest appliances, is supported. And those are connected up to the orchestrators, and they do all of the inspection, for all of the traffic that comes through. So we've got the orchestrator and the appliances we've talked about already. And then how does this all connect together? So typically when you buy Maestro, you're going to get DAC cables as part of a bundle, or, as a la carte. That's going to be your connectivity from the orchestrator to the appliances themselves. That's preferred because it is the cheapest way to go. You can use optics as well. It's more expensive, but some people choose to do that because of distance. If you're using that, if it's too long of a distance between the orchestrators and the appliances for connectivity, you can use optics. And then, the orchestrator is going to connect to your data center switches using optics only. DAC cables, we'll get to that a little later as far as what's supported, but optics are what you would use to connect to your switches. So these are the 2 orchestrators that we have currently, the 140 and the 175. As you can see here, the 140 is more suited to 10 gig connectivity. You've got 48 10 gig ports. You've got 4 40/100 gig ports that can be used there. Whereas the 175 is geared more towards 100 gig/40 connectivity. You've got 3200 gig ports on there. So it's a matter of, what you want to deploy. And we'll get to that in a little bit as far as, some of the tips and tricks. Like I mentioned, from the appliance standpoint, we support everything from the 5900 and newer. including the newest models, the 16.6s, 28.6s, which are the 1U appliances with the two 100 gig ports on them. Those have been very popular with Maestro deployments just because of the small footprint and, you know, having the perfect connectivity to connect to the orchestrators. As new appliances come out, those also will work with Maestro as well. You know, any quantum appliance, like I said, 5900 and up. So what does a typical Maestro setup look like? So this is what you would see, you know, in a typical deployment where you've got two orchestrators. You know, usually people put them up at the top. You know, we call it a top of rack solution because typically, you know, it goes up at the top where most of your network connectivity comes into the rack. And then in this case, we've got four appliances. These are MHO 140s that are on the screen here. So the typical port layout here is you've got out of the box, when you unbox it, this is how it's configured. You know, you've got four management ports on the left. Then you've got a block of ports that are used as your uplinks that connect to your data center for all of your connectivity, firewall management, you know, like I said, DMZ, internet, all that fun stuff. The next block is your downlinks. That's your connectivity to the appliances. And as you can see here, we've got the first, both orchestrators are connecting to all of the appliances. In this case, we've got two links total, but you could do all four of those links on the line card as well for redundancy. These are automatically bonded. So when you plug in these, you know, like I said, DAC cables are preferred. And that's typically what most people will do. But if you use fiber, you know, transceivers, same thing. As soon as you plug these into the orchestrator and plug them into the appliances, they're automatically detected and the interfaces are also automatically bonded. So if you have more than one connection from the orchestrator to the appliance, we automatically bond that behind the scenes. And consider this like the backplane without having an actual chassis. This is obscured from you. You'll not see it in Smart Console. You'll not see it in the web UI either. You know, it's all done behind the scenes, and this is just all of your traffic movement between the orchestrators and the appliances. So tips for deployment, which orchestrator is for you? So what this comes down to is, you know, do you mainly need 1 gig or 10 gig connectivity, which is suited for the MHO 140, or do you need 40/100 with the MHO 175? This is probably one of the most most important questions to ask before you buy Maestro and before you roll it out, because if you need 1 gig connectivity, you can only do that on the MHO 140. You can't do it on the MHO 175. The 175s, the lowest you can do is 10 gig. And that is through a 4x10 splitter, whether it's fiber or DAC, depending on whether you're using it for downlinks or using it for uplinks. So this is something you definitely want to plan for up front. At the 140, if you need 1 gig ports, definitely choose the 140. If you need, you know, if you're doing mostly 40/100 or even just some 10 gig, then the 175 is going to be better. And the 175 does cost a little bit more because of that higher end connectivity. Next question to ask is 1 or 2 orchestrators. I'll tell you right now, best practices is always to have 2 per location, because otherwise you are in a single point of failure. So if anything happens to the orchestrator, then, you know, your security group is going to go down. So, but if you have a dual site deployment, so if you've got 2 sites active standby and they are both capable of taking all of the traffic at any given time, then you could get away with 1 orchestrator in each of those sites, and the traffic would just move between the 2 sites automatically if an orchestrator goes down. But again, best practices is to do 2 orchestrators in each site just to have that extra redundancy. But not everyone does. You know, it's you know, it is supported to do 1 in each data center for a dual site deployment. How many sites? You know, if you're doing dual site, then, you know, you need to decide, are you using VSX? Are you going to do VSLS? Are you going to do active standby if it's just in standard security gateway mode? You know, that kind of thing. What about splitter cables? So as I mentioned, for the 175s, because they're 40/100 gig ports, if you need to use 10 gig connectivity, then you need to use a 4x10 splitter. As I mentioned, you're going to use a 4x10 DAC for your, you know, you can use that for your downlinks, and you can do 4x10 fiber, you know, for your uplinks. You just want to do that planning up front. to figure out exactly what you need. And this is, again, what we talked about already, 48 1/10 gig ports for the MHO 140. You get 8 40/100 ports on the right side to use just like the 175s. And the 175s are just 32 40/100 ports. All right, so the next thing is transceivers and DAC cables. As I mentioned already, DAC cables are only supported for downlinks between the MHO and the appliances. They may work for uplinks, but this is not supported. So if you're doing it in a lab environment, then it's fine. You know, if it's not a production environment and your DAC cables work, you know, for the uplinks to your switches in a lab environment, that's fine. It's just if you call support with an issue, the first thing you'll hear is that it's not supported. You have to use transceivers. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have downlinks, you know, that you need more than 3 meters for, you will need to use transceivers or fiber. The longest DAC cable that we have in the catalog right now is a 3 meter. This goes for 10 gig, it goes for 40 gig, it goes for 100 gig. It also goes for the 4x10 splitters as well. The longest 4x10 DAC cable we have is 3 meters. So if you need to have a longer run than that, then you need to use transceivers and fiber. This is really a really important note here. Do not use third-party DAC cables. I have had customers that have bought off-brand DAC cables that were quote unquote coded to checkpoint standards or coded to checkpoint SKUs. They are not coded to checkpoint SKUs. They will get blocked on enforcement on the appliances when they're plugged in. And this could lead to an unnecessary RMA of the entire Maestro stack, which I've seen with more than one customer in the past several months. So please don't use third-party DAC cables. Just make sure you use the checkpoint part numbers only. Again, in the lab environments, maybe you can get away with it, but for production, definitely not. It's not supported. And this is the other cool thing. So you can mix DAC and transceiver/fiber downlinks for different appliances as long as the speed is the same. So some deployments may have one orchestrator and one rack, and then maybe several rows down or totally other side of the data center, you've got the other orchestrator. Because the orchestrators are far apart from each other, more than 3 meters, you know, you may need to do fiber between, you know, the appliances on the one side and the orchestrator on the other side, et cetera. We call this a multi-room deployment, you know, multi-rack, multi-room, where some of the appliances and orchestrators are a little farther away from each other rather than being in the same rack. And this is supported. We've got many customers that do this. It's also supported to use fiber patch panels. As long as it is just straight through, you know, just straight layer one, that'll work as well. So it's just a nice thing to know that you can mix the DACs and transceivers for downlinks as long as the speed is the same. And as I mentioned, uplinks have to use checkpoint transceivers on the orchestrator, and then you need to use the switch vendor compatible transceivers on the customer switches. You know, this is standard practice for anything that you know, connects the switches you know, on the network, is to use obviously the switch compatible transceivers there. But for our stuff, you know, for the orchestrators and our appliances, the transceivers, you know, on the orchestrators rather, for this, they need to be checkpoint transceivers. So I'm gonna keep this on the screen here. Let me tab through here as far as what is supported. So the MHO 140, as I mentioned earlier, it supports 1 gig and 10 gig. This includes copper. This includes short range and long range fiber as well for all of those transceivers. And then we support 10/40/100 for DACs. Same thing for short range and long range for the QSFP 40/100, 40 gig BIDI, and then the 100 gig SWDM4 and CWDM4. We also support, as of 8120, we support the 25 gig short range and long range transceivers on the MHO 140. These are the SFP form factor, so they will fit in the you know, in the 10 gig ports on these, and then they will work you know, in the 25 gig mode for the 140s. But it does require 8120 or newer, so that's the gotcha there. MHO 175. So here we support the 40/100, you know, short range and long range, 40 gig bidirectional, 100 gig SWDM4, CWDM4, 40/100 DAC. We also do support the 25 gig SR and LR, but for this, you have to use the -80P SKU. Because the form factor is SFP plus and the 175s only have QSFP slots, you basically are using a converter that converts the form factor, and that's included in this -80P SKU. Again, only supported on 8120 and newer. But we've got a lot of customers that have been asking for this for 25 gig connectivity. And so with 8120, and since this is typically only going to be used for uplinks, this would only require the orchestrators to be on 8120 for this, because all the connectivity terminates there for these uplinks. If you're going to use 25 gig also on the appliance side, then obviously the appliances in the security group would also need to be 8120. But that was a question that's been asked quite a bit recently since 8120 came out, is can I just have the orchestrators on 8120 and leave my security groups on 8110? And the answer is yes, if you're just using it for uplinks. We also support 10 gig connectivity, as I mentioned, using DAC 4x10, which is this SKU, the DAC-40/10G. This comes in a 1 meter and 3 meter SKU. And then you can also use a 40 gig short range transceiver and use this SKU, the CPAC TR40 split QSFP. This comes actually in a 3 meter, and there is actually a 6 meter SKU for this as well. So this is one of the few where it's actually more than 3 meters. But this is fiber. So this is basically going to be an MPO. It's an MPO cable that plugs into the transceiver, and then it splits out to 4 LC connections at 10 gig. You just have the 3 meter or 6 meter. This is one of the few exceptions where you can actually use a different cable for this because this is just fiber. The transceiver is what matters, that plugs into the orchestrator. But the cable itself, you can use any MPO to 10 gig to 4x10 LC cable. We've had customers ask this quite a bit, so it's something I want to throw out there, that if you need more than 6 meters, if you need a 20 meter cable or more than that, obviously these transceivers, there's 2 SKUs now for the 40 gig short range. There's the 100 meter and the 300 meter. So as long as you've got the right transceiver that meets that length that you need, then you can use a splitter cable from a third-party vendor, because it's just fiber, it's just light. So, and that is officially supported to use, whatever there. It's just on the DAC side that the DAC cable has to be a checkpoint SKU, for the enforcement there. So just something to throw out there, because it's something that I do get asked quite a bit. And then last, 10 gig connectivity is also supported on 8110 and 8120 using the CPAC TR QSFP28 to SFP28 adapter. It's the same part that comes with the 25 gig transceivers for MHO 175. Believe it or not, we've had several customers that have asked for this to not want to do 4x10s, to just do a 10 gig transceiver in a 100 gig port due to human error or just policy, security policy of not wanting to do splitters. Obviously every customer, every partner, everyone has different requirements and different rules, and regulations. And so this is one thing that R&D included in 8110 and 20 is the ability to take up a whole 100 gig port slot and use a 10 gig transceiver in there natively. You have to set the port to 4x10, and it is just going to use just that first port of the split out for the 10 gig transceiver that's in there. So just something to know for anyone that needs to use just dedicated 10 gig in a 100 gig slot on the 175. You can do that on 8110 and 8120. And this SK, definitely note this one, SK92755. This has all of the transceiver compatibility information for all Checkpoint products, including the orchestrators, including all of our quantum appliances. Everything is there, and it is updated almost on a weekly basis as new appliances come, as new transceivers get certified, like the 25 gig transceivers, things like that. Extended range transceivers were added a while back. All of that's in this SK, so please check there, and that will tell you exactly what is currently compatible, at that time. So if we went through the MHO 140, ports already on the previous slide, just want to go through this real quick. This is just for reference, for those that want to look at this later, since it's being recorded, just from a reference standpoint. You've got your management, uplink, downlink. The right side is uplink. The port 48 is a sync interface between the two MHOs. This is the default layout when it comes out of the box. But sometimes you might want to change some ports around. Say you need more uplink ports than what's here, or you need more downlink ports than what's here on the default. You can change the port type using the command set Maestro port, and then the port number, type, and saying downlink or uplink. This is really handy. Like I said, if you want to rearrange the port layout on this, you can do that to meet your needs. For most deployments, what's here as it ships out of the box does work fine, but you never know. So this gives you the flexibility to be able to do that. On the 175s, we have not looked at the layout of that yet. 175s only have one management port, and that is port 1. Then the next block of ports, is through 18 is uplinks, and then 19 through 30 is downlinks. So that's going to be what can connect to your appliances. And then you've got site sync. That's a reserve port, port 31, which is for dual site deployments only. Otherwise, that port's not used. And then you've got your internal sync port, just like port 48 on the MHO 140s is. Port 32 is the internal sync that goes between the orchestrators. Those 31 and 32 can't be changed at all. Just like port 48 has to be the sync one for the MHO 140. That is what it is. But you can also change port types here as well on the 175s. So if you need to have more downlinks or more uplinks, you can change the ports around. And then in addition to that, this is a good one to note as well. The port speed on the MHO 175 by default is 100 gig for all the ports. So you've got a set Maestro port command with the QSFP mode. So you're going to do set Maestro port, the port number, and then QSFP mode. This is what allows you to set it to 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig, or 4x10. On 8120, you will also see 25 gig in here as well. For 8110, you would only be able to do these 4 options. So you'll do that, go through the prompts, and then then you'll be good to go to use the different speeds. However, one of the gotchas that we found in deployments over many months now is if you're using a 4x10 fiber splitter, so you're using a 40 gig short range transceiver using the MPO to 4x10 splitter, what'll happen is after you reboot the MHO, this is on the 175s, if you reboot it or restart the OrcD process, then it's going to reset it back to 40 gig again. So what R&D has provided to many customers, and I wanted it to be here for reference because it's come up so often, you use this torutil command in expert mode on the orchestrator, and this would be on both of the orchestrators if you have 2 orchestrators. You do torutil set QSFP autoconfig off. This will survive reboots. It just has to be run once, and then it's good. This only applies if you're doing 4x10 splitters. Whether, if you're using fiber, and actually it seems to be a problem with the DACs half the time too. So anytime you do 4x10, but especially with fiber, you just run this command and do it on both orchestrators if you have 2, and then you're good to go. It survives reboots. Otherwise, what'll happen is if it resets it back to 40 gig and you've already built a group, sometimes it'll break the security group because now those other interfaces, the sub interfaces that were split out, don't exist anymore. And it can cause all kinds of weirdness and may require you to rebuild the security group and all that mess. So this is the way to go as part of the new implementation, to run this command if you're doing the 4x10 splitters, and then you're good right from the beginning. You do this before you even build the security group, it'll survive reboots, and then you're good to go. So redundancy. Obviously, Maestro offers a lot of redundancy, but like I mentioned, 2 orchestrators are best at any location. You want to make sure all of your uplinks, which are your external interfaces, are bonded. Make sure that your switches are logically presented as a single device to the orchestrator. So like in the Cisco world, this means VPCs. If you're not able to do that, then don't use LACP. If you've got 2 two stacked switches that are not in a VPC, then you need to make sure you use active backup or XOR as the bonding method there. Because obviously if you use LACP and they're not part of the same VPC, you're going to have problems. This is just a picture of the cabling that you would do on the orchestrators there, just for reference. You want to make sure that your appliances are connected correctly to the orchestrator. So the orchestrator 1 goes to the odd ports on the appliances, and orchestrator 2 is going to be the even numbered ports. Picture here on the bottom shows that. So you can see here, obviously the ones in red are odd numbered, so that would go to MHO number 1. And then the even numbered ports would go to MHO number 2. This goes for whether it's a 4x10, 2x40, 2x100, as you see on the screen here. If you cross connect these or misconnect them, you can run into a situation where the MHOs don't know which number they are, where they both think they're number 1, both think they're number 2. You'll see weird stuff in the web UI and in the CLI. So this is one thing to always check and make sure that you've got these cabled up correctly. And you want to make sure you have enough capacity during upgrades to handle the load. So, this means if you've got a 4x10, use all 4 ports. So you have 2 downlinks, per MHO. That way you've got enough capacity there. Obviously with the 40 and the 100 gigs, you generally will have enough capacity with when one MHO goes down with that. But for the 10 gigs, instead of using a 2x10 card, it's much better to use a 4x10 card, so you get double the downlink capacity that way. So just from the scalable platform side, Maestro runs scalable platforms code. It is a separate ISO, 8020 SP, 8030 SP, both of which are end of support at this point. Were the initial releases, then followed by R81, and then 8110 and 8120 are what are out today. 8110 is the go-to today. It's the recommended version. One of the cool things is, as of R81, Maestro uses main train jumbo hotfixes. On 8020 SP and 8030 SP, we were using specific SP jumbos. So now it's all main train. The same jumbo that you put on a quantum appliance that's not Maestro goes on the Maestro appliances, goes on the orchestrators. It's all the same. So this is a very, very important simplification, and it led to much quicker resolution of problems because it's all part of the same jumbo. You don't have to wait for a SP specific one. 8120 is expected to be recommended sometime later in 2023. I would expect within the next couple months, as enough customers adopt it, then it'll be recommended across the board, including Maestro. But 8110 is the recommended version right now. And we have a lot of customers that were still on 8020 SP, 8030 SP that are moving to 8110. If you're still there, please do upgrade to 8110. It is significantly more stable, not just from a jumbo perspective, but just overall stability is so much better than 8020 and 8030 SP were. It's much more advanced. And once 8120 is recommended, I recommend upgrading the orchestrators to that at the very least, and then, do the security groups if it's got some features there, that you need. If you have a quick query, you can look on Checkmates. You can look at this Maestro FAQ, SK147853. There's a lot of good information there, just that's updated all the time by R&D, just for any Maestro questions you might have. From the upgrade standpoint, the jumbo on the orchestrator can be done either in the CLI or the web UI. But when you get to the security group, you can only do it in the CLI. There is no web UI CPUs on the security groups. I don't believe that there are plans to do that just because of the way that the security groups function. This is done just in the CLI. And then on the orchestrator and the security group, do not upgrade CPUs unless you're specifically instructed to do so in the SK. This can break things. So unless it says to do so in the admin guide as part of a process, don't do it because it can break things irreparably. So from the workflow perspective, I'm just going to tab through these so I've got it on the screen. So, when you do your deployment, you want to connect all the cables to the right places and make sure they're seated properly and not inserted upside down. Believe it or not, this is one of the most common things that cause a deployment to not work, is the equipment's put in the rack, the cables are supposedly plugged in correctly, but some of the DAC cables are plugged in upside down. So they're not seated properly. There's no link, layer one problem. Gently tug on the DAC cable after you plug it in, not from the tab that you pull to pull it out, but from the cable itself. If it doesn't come out, then it's seated properly. Believe it or not, that's one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're good to go there. After the cables are done, you want to boot the first orchestrator, then you boot the second orchestrator, and then you're going to boot up one appliance. This is going to become your single management object, the SMO, your first appliance in the security group. You can power the other ones on too, but typically you just start with just the one just to keep it easy. And that's what you're going to start with, when you do your build. This is just the cabling, just for reference from a cabling standpoint of what we've got. Then you're going to install the recommended jumbo on the orchestrator, which right now is take 94 for 8110, is take 10 for 8120. Then you're going to configure orchestrator and site amounts, depending on whether you have single or dual orchestrator in each site or single or dual site. You want to make sure each orchestrator pair in each site has the same configuration. Then you're going to create your security group with the required interfaces, which is going to be your management interface and whatever uplinks to your data center. Then you're going to add just one appliance to the security group. Then you're going to install the jumbo on that security group with the one member. Make sure everything's good. Make sure that policy gets installed. Traffic distribution, obviously you should see traffic is coming there with ASG perf-v. You're going to check ASG monitor, ASG diag, make sure everything looks good. Then you're going to enable image auto cloning after the whole security group is up. Then you're going to disable that. So what image auto cloning does is it will install that jumbo that you installed on your one member. It basically clones the configuration to all the other members quickly. You don't have to manually install the jumbo on each member after that. Then once the group is up, you want to turn it off because it can cause issues with other configuration later. But if you add additional appliances to the group later, you'll just do this process again. You turn on auto cloning, drag and drop the new appliances to the group, click apply, wait a few minutes for it to get finished, and then turn off auto cloning again. Then once it's done, usually you're looking at about 20 minutes time, at most, in most cases with adding all your other appliances. You make sure everything looks good, check ASG diag, check ASG perf-v again for traffic distribution, and then you're good to go. And then the last thing is mix and match. So I mentioned the end of rip and replace earlier, and this mechanism, mix and match, is what allows us to do that. You can mix different appliances in the same security group, which you previously could not do. They had to all be the same. The method for this, the reason is to allow older appliances to exist in the group with their natural replacement. So this is the end of rip and replace. Obviously, you're not going to want to do like a 6200 and a 286 in the same group. That is not supported. That's not the goal of mix and match. And because of that, we have SK162373 that shows those latest combinations. Like for example, here for 5900, 6800, and 7000, those three can coexist with each other in a security group and mix and match for replacement purposes, or just to run them that way for a period of time. But again, the main goal with mix and match, other than using it in lab environments, so I will say in a lab environment, you can mix and match whatever you want. Just need to make sure that the number of cores are correct, for the group and all that fun stuff. But for a production environment, the reason for mix and match is to replace older models with new models. And what's so awesome is that, say you've got 5900s in the group today, you want to put 7000s in there. All you do is add the 7000s to the security group with auto cloning turned on. It basically, you're going to get the configuration put over there. You're going to take the old appliances out, and that's it. That's your life cycle management. Now you've got 7000s in your security group. The 5900s are out. Then you just physically disconnect them, and that's your life cycle management. You're done. No re-IPing, no changing of routes, no swinging things here, building stuff in advance. No, you don't have to do any of that. So that's one of the coolest features here with mix and match. And then the last thing, just, why choose Maestro, right? So single vendor, everything works together. It's built to work this way with the orchestrators and appliances. Standard Gaia, it's less changes. You don't have cluster IPs to deal with. You've got that single management object, one IP per interface. it's just really good. It's very versatile. I didn't talk about this earlier, but you can do multiple security groups, up to 8 today per Maestro stack. We can do single or multiple sites. We can do VSLS for dual site for VSX. Orchestrators perform, per flow traffic distribution. So, in an ideal world, you're going to have equal distribution to all the appliances in your group. And then, image cloning adds capacity in about 6 minutes. In a production environment, it could be closer to 15 if you've got a lot of traffic going through. But for a new build, you're looking at like 6 to 8 minutes, to add an appliance. And then best of all, it's managed as a single object in Smart Console. So you have one object with one interface, one IP per interface. That's it. You don't have all these cluster members showing up in there. You don't have all these different IPs to manage. It's just one single object there. So it just makes it easier from a management perspective. And all of it's done in Smart Console as far as policy, just like a normal cluster. And that's it. And that's all I've got. So I'm going to go through some questions. I know we ran over a little bit. Apologize. It's a lot to cram into to 30 minutes, but if we have some.
Yeah, great information. No problem going over. You did answer a couple of questions during the prezo. So, okay. You mentioned the mixed gateway models. What's the max gateways in a stack or security group?
So right now you can do 31 appliances per security group, and you can do 52 appliances total for a Maestro stack. That's really just from a cabling perspective, you can't get more than that. So, but 31 per security group is what you can do right now for the upper limit. If you're doing dual site, then it is half that. It's actually 16. So if you have dual site, you can do 16 per security group in each site. Like I mentioned, you can do 8 security groups today. I know R&D is looking to increase that for customers that are wanting to do more smaller security groups. I believe they're going to raise that number to 16, maybe sometime later this year. But I don't have confirmation as to when that's coming.
Okay. The question is, so would you recommend not having an active standby setup anymore if Maestro is used, or would it still make sense to create this in Maestro?
So most customers are going to use, most deployments rather that I see are single site, 2 orchestrators, and then however many security groups you want, they're all active. So in Maestro, the only way to have active standby is to do dual site, which means generally you're going to have 2 data centers, one that's active at a time. And then you have another stack in the other data center that it can flip to. The IP space has to be the same in both data centers. That's kind of the wrinkle there. We are looking to have active for dual site. That should be coming later this year, as well as having more than 2 sites. That's also coming at some point, maybe by the end of the year. But I will say most deployments today are just 2 orchestrators and however many appliances you need for your security groups, all active. Just so that way you don't have anything sitting there, doing nothing like a traditional cluster.
Yep. I think you answered this one, but I'll run through it. The MHO 140 supports 10 gig. Will they also support 25 gig?
It does. Yep. It supports 25 gig as well.
Yep. Will there be fast deployment blink images for Maestro gateways? The only way currently to get Maestro gateway to start off on the version is to use USB and isomorphic, which can be tricky when remote.
Yeah, so I know there was some talk of potentially trying to get Blink to work with it, but I'm not sure where that is on the roadmap. I haven't seen it on any of my active roadmap items, but I'll take it as an offline thing to go with R&D with. I know that in 8120, they're using light shot instead of FCD for the images, so it is quicker for that. And with R82 that's coming later this year, that will be even faster to do those deployments. But the initial deployment still does have to be from isomorphic stick or Pixie boot or that, from my understanding. But I'll get with R&D and I'll find out about that.
Okay, great. When will the 81.20 hotfix come out that allows MHO 140s to be used with QLS 250s?
So that is going to be coming by the end of this month, is my understanding. For 8110, there's a hot fix coming by the end of this month that will allow for the MLS appliances and the QLS appliances to be used in Maestro. For 8120, that's going to be coming sometime in June. And then they will and that will also bring some of the additional features for Lightspeed to Maestro, like VSX, IPv6, jumbo frames, that kind of thing. So that's going to be coming in with 8120 as a jumbo in June. I don't have exact dates for that. That was just shared with me yesterday on a bi-weekly call I have with R&D. So it is coming. Like I said, 8110 by the end of this month is what I've told, and then probably by the end of June for 8120.
Great. Got a couple more here quick. When will hot fixes be available to be when will fixes be available to be applied to devices attached to the orchestrator from the manager?
Oh, so probably by the end of this year. I think they're targeting that for R82 or R82.10 to be able to push those jumbos out from Smart Console. But it is a roadmap item, but I'm not sure exactly which of those releases it'll come in, but it is on the roadmap.
Okay. We got one more here. So if anybody has any, put them in quickly. Is it possible to share uplinks among SGs using the Gaia GUI to configure? I believe sharing uplinks is supported, but it's not possible to configure in Gaia.
So by default, the only uplinks you're allowed to share without any special configuration is the management interface. That's the exception. Anything that's labeled as a management port can be shared with multiple security groups by default. Obviously, you have different IPs for each of your security groups themselves, but they can be on the same network. For regular uplinks, for data, data uplinks to your data center outside of management interfaces, with 8110 and newer, it is supported. But you have to use VLAN tagging. It has to be done in the CLI. You have to do VLAN tagging for it. And the caveat is that one of the security group members in one of the security groups is responsible for all of the LACP and all the tagging. And if something happens to that security group, it can take all the security groups down. So that's why we don't recommend using shared uplinks unless it's absolutely required, because there is a risk. You're now creating a dependency of all of your security groups are dependent on that one security group that is responsible for the LACP negotiations and for doing that tagging. So that's why we don't recommend it. And that's why it's not enabled by default and only able to be done in the CLI today.
Great. Okay. I think that covered it for questions. So thank you, Tom. Fantastic information. We'll send the follow-up email with any reference content and recording link of this session. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. The subject for that will be dynamic, updatable, and API generated objects. You'll see the invitation for that soon, so please click and register and we'll send you the invite. With that, we'll let you go. Tom, thanks again for all the great information, and everyone else, enjoy your day. See you here next time.
Thanks,
Bye all.
everybody.